Well, Roger Dooley, this is a tremendous honor for me. Welcome to the Marketing That Works podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Drew, and thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. And I can't wait for everybody to see your virtual backdrop there with the books and everything. And that's the first thing right off the top. I want to encourage everybody. Roger, I talked about this a little bit in the bio at the top of the show, but he's an international keynote speaker and prolific writer and author of two books that I'm very, very fond of. One is Brainfluence, which is also the name of his podcast, and also Friction, which is a huge topic in the world of marketing and customer experience and customer service today. So one thing I wanted to start with, though, Roger, is that your blog and a lot of your background is based around the idea and the principle of neuromarketing. But I would love to explain to the audience, what is that?
Sure. And you may not get the same definition from everybody that you ask, but my definition is a broad one, and
Okay.
that is to use any understanding of how our brains work to market better. Now, some people like a more restrictive definition, and it's sometimes called consumer neuroscience, that uses tools like EEG to measure brain waves or biometrics to measure the pulse rate and skin conductance and all those sorts of things. And from that, evaluate specific marketing materials, like evaluate a video advertisement or some print material, and try and gauge the consumers or customers, because it can be B2B as well, non-conscious reaction. Because the whole concept behind neuromarketing is that, first of all, people cannot really explain what they like, why they would do something, or whether they will do that thing in the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's in some cases they don't want to, if it's a topic that's sensitive for them. In other cases, they just can't explain. I mean, can you really explain in detail why you bought a particular car that you did? I mean, you could probably explain certain aspects of it, but there are probably some other influences that were there that you either don't want to admit, or that you simply just aren't really consciously aware of.
Right.
And the whole concept behind neuromarketing is to get below the surface of the customer's brain and figure out what's going on and how to do a better job of marketing to that customer.
Yeah.
So what I focused on, because these tools like EEG
Mm-hmm.
and biometrics and so on are relatively costly to use, although they are getting cheaper. In fact, there are some tools like eye tracking, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that are now getting very inexpensive to use. You can even do web-based or mobile-based eye
Mm-hmm.
tracking studies. So the prices are coming down, but by and large, marketers can't really afford the time or the money to use those on answering every question. What I've focused on for probably the last 15 odd years or so is taking the tools of behavioral science, of psychology, and of general neuroscience knowledge, and turning those into actionable strategies for marketers. So they don't have to go out and run their own study necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but to give them a starting point. And having said that they don't have to run studies, I do encourage all marketers to test.
Mm-hmm.
To me, testing is absolutely essential
Mm-hmm.
if you want to really market your customers correctly. Even if you don't have tremendous volume, you can run very simple tests over time. When I send out one of my newsletters, I will often split the recipients with two different subject lines,
Mm-hmm.
not because I'm going to then roll out some bigger marketing based on, but just to help me understand what my people respond to. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the sort of thing that any marketer can do. So often we see hippo decisions where the highest paid person in the organization is the one that's choosing the
Sure.
final design. Okay, what's the website going to look like? Design A or design B? It comes down to, well, I think design A is the one. Let's go with that one.
Sure.
And
Very
then forget about it.
subjective.
Forget about it for 3 years
Yeah.
until, gee, the website's looking dated. If you look at Amazon, Drew, when was the last time they redesigned their website? If you think about it, it's like, gee, I don't know that they ever redesign their website. It always looks the same. In
Right.
fact, it is not the same as it was. There are lots of little changes, but if you could do a screenshot from 10 years ago compared to now, you would be able to spot all sorts of little differences. But they have never done a big bang type redesign that the way many companies do it. Instead, they are constantly testing and optimizing. They'll
Hmm.
test, putting something in a different type, or they will test a different way of describing something. And this has enabled them to really optimize their design.
Yep.
So, this obviously, unfortunately, none of us has the scale that Amazon does, but we can all do those sorts of tests in a small way, and ultimately, get better job of do a better job of understanding our customers, and then secondly, market to those customers more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Your example of Amazon, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we kind of dive into friction. But you're absolutely right that it's interesting that you talked about sort of this subjective design of marketers and business owners of I like that, so let's put that on the website. But really, true marketers are looking at what their customer and how their customer responds to something and the customer experience. And really, what you see with Amazon is that it's not about pretty, it's not about fashion, it's about function. And it's truly about Jeff Bezos with that day one attitude of we're always just trying to make the site better for the customer. So design really isn't, there's design, yes, but then there's pretty design, aesthetic design that they really don't focus on all that much. They focus on conversion, which I think is fantastic. So thank you for unpacking that a little bit for the
Yeah, and
audience.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't minimize
Yeah.
design, Drew. I think in
Right.
certain instances, for certain kinds of businesses, design is really important. If you are an ad agency or a design agency,
Sure.
you had better have a good-looking website or mobile app because uh, people should trust you to be able to execute an attractive design.
Right.
And if it looks like the dog's breakfast, as my friends in England say, you're not going to get many clients. If you are selling, say, a $90,000 custom timepiece, uh, you had better have very high-end design on your website because it's got to convey the whole image that this is a place that somebody who can afford to spend that kind of money would want to shop. So design has
Good
its
point.
place,
Good
but
point.
to me, it's all about testing. In fact, I know a lot of people who are in the conversion optimization business. These are very smart people who
Hmm.
have helped dozens and hundreds of clients improve their website performance. And if you go to them and say, well, okay, hey, take a look at this website, what would you do? They can give you some suggestions. Say, okay, well, this probably is too small, or people aren't gonna be able to see this, or this is confusing to the average customer. But they are gonna just change that. They're gonna say, okay, these are three things we should test. Even with their level of expertise, they aren't going to guarantee that something's going to work or just say, go with my gut feel, that's good enough. They're going to say, okay, I think based on my experience that this improvement will help. We should test that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, absolutely. Good points and good counterpoint on the design piece because it can and does matter in a lot of different instances, and it's very important for different companies. So let's talk about your book Friction, which I absolutely love, and I spent um, probably 6 months diving into just looking at all of these different examples of removing friction, especially in the new digital age that we're in. And now we have COVID. So it's even more important to remove friction and have contactless X, Y, and Z. But let's talk about the subtitle to your book is called The Untapped Force that can be your most powerful advantage. So, would you talk a little bit about some of the principles in the book and why friction is so important for marketers and business owners to dive into?
Sure. Well, let me first tell you the definition of friction that I'm using. And that is the simplest one is I've got some longer definitions, but the simplest one is uh, friction is any unnecessary effort to perform a task. So if something is unnecessarily effortful, there is friction there. And the reason I say that it's a force that can be your advantage, 90% of the time or more, you want to remove friction
Hmm.
because it is getting in the way of your customer doing whatever it is you want, whether you are trying to generate leads, whether you're trying to generate orders. Any friction is going to slow down the customer. There are certain cases, though, where adding friction can help. And sometimes certain luxury products make it difficult to buy. Uh, Part of that is because the person has to sort of go through this experience and expend the effort to do it, and they value the ultimate experience more. And there's other examples. You can steer customer behavior with friction. If you have one path that you prefer they not take and one that you would prefer they do take, you could add a little bit of friction to the less desirable path, not in a dark pattern sort of way so that you're manipulating your customers into doing
Sure.
something that they don't want to do, but that you can steer their behavior. And I think a great example comes from an area that probably most people are familiar with, and that is retirement planning. We all know that in the United States, we have largely voluntary retirement planning. Unless we are lucky enough to work for a business that has a defined pension, that they will simply pay you out if you stay there for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
Most of us are supposed to save for retirement using what are called 401k plans. These are private accounts. And the good thing is they can move with you. So if you change employers, you can still keep that. And it's in that respect, a great system. But many people don't participate. And research ended up proving, this is one reason why Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize, that if you could simply make it easier to sign up, that more people would sign up. And the way they really simplified it was they opted people in. Instead of having people fill out a form to enroll, which is pretty typical. You want to enroll in a program, okay, here's a form to fill out. They said, okay, that is slowing people down. It's adding unnecessary friction. Instead, since we know that everybody should really be saving, let's opt them in, but make it easy for them to opt out. So it's not like you're manipulating them into doing something that they don't want to do.
Sure.
In other words, like when you are automatically opted into somebody's spammy email list, okay, that's not the kind of opt-in that you want to use necessarily if it's automatic. But in this case, they said, okay, look, no problem. If you don't want to participate, then just, you can just say so and we will opt you out. But by that simple friction elimination process, they dramatically increased the number of people that would save for retirement. And this is really an important societal goal. And it was such a simple thing. So in my book, Friction, I started off looking primarily at the sales and conversion aspect. That's what drew me to it. I was looking at, okay, how do we convert better? And all my research showed that if you can reduce friction, you'll get more customers. And if I looked at success stories like WhatsApp, for example, which was far from the only messaging application at the time or messaging platform, but they made it ridiculously simple to sign up and ridiculously simple and fast to invite your friends. In fact, one user experience expert did a teardown on their onboarding process from start to finish, including verifying your mobile phone number. You could do the entire WhatsApp registration verification process in about 2 minutes and a few seconds.
Wow.
And then they made it simple with just like one tap to invite your contacts. So this is how they grew to millions and millions of users in no time, because you can imagine, sign up a new user. And of course, they want to have people to talk to, right? So they invite their friends. Within, by minute number 3, these people are getting their invites. Some of them are signing up in 2 minutes and blasting out their friends.
Right.
And it turned into a viral phenomenon that ended up making the company worth $25 billion.
Right.
And they were almost pre-revenue. I mean, it's insane, but they just made it so easy. And in fact, friction has been the one area where it's gotten a lot of traction has been in Silicon Valley. For the last 5 or 10 years, people have been quite aware that by simplifying processes, making things easy, you can get people to do those things.
Right.
And it's not rocket science, but Richard Thaler himself says that if you want to make people do something, if you want to get people to do something, make it easier.
Yeah.
And I sense that frustrates him because he's called in to talk to national governments about how we can improve these processes and how we can get more people to do what we want them to do. And his answer is pretty simple: we'll make it easier. And it's always like, well, that's too simple. We want some sort of magic behavioral science dust that you're going to sprinkle on this.
Yeah.
And it's going to make people want to do it or whatever. And he said, just make it easier. And obviously, both in corporate America and in our government, we have a lot of processes that have a lot of friction in them, even today. And to me, that's kind of wild that, we can have Nobel Prizes awarded for such a simple understanding, but leaders don't internalize that.
Yeah, I'd love your thoughts on why you think that is. I mean, it just seems like such a simple principle to build into a company to always be analyzing your customer interfaces. And you know, you're talking about governments, so governments, their customers are the citizens. But for most people, they have paying customers. And like you just said, Richard Thaler is explaining to everybody just if you want to make more revenue, if you want to grow your user base, just make things simpler. And I mean, I think, and again, you use this example and talk a lot about Amazon that, you know, one click pay and all these other things that are out there. Like, and I'll give you an example. We were on the phone with a company yesterday that wants to make a concessions experience better at a stadium. And they said, well, we can make it so that we build it into your app, people click on it, and then they can go to a fast lane type experience. And for some reason, you know, my mind goes, that's the first things we should be working on. Those should be first in line from a capital expense instead of last in line. Disney put it first in line when they did the Magic Band and different things like that. I don't know. Do you have anything to explain the
Yes,
psychology behind that? Yeah.
I've got a few explanations,
Yeah.
Drew, and you know, one is that uh, for every 10 companies that claim to be customer centric, putting the customer first, probably one is. I mean, we keep going back to Amazon, but they are a company that puts the customer first. I mean, they really do. I was in the mail order business for years and very familiar with e-commerce, and returns are the devil, okay? They are incredibly expensive for businesses. Merchandise comes back damaged, they can't resell it, they can't always get their money back from the vendor. You've got to have customer service people process it, you've got to have warehouse people process it. You know, every time you get a return, it costs you a ton of money. And in fact, I remember when I was in the mail order business, I figured that if I sold one printer, I was selling electronic components and computer systems. If somebody returned one printer based on the margins that I had and the cost of that, I would probably have to sell 10 more printers just to make back the cost of that return. So many companies try and discourage returns. Amazon makes returns easy because they are truly customer centric
Right.
and they get the importance of effort. You know, a lot of companies don't have a leader like Jeff Bezos who will push back. You know, something that I see pretty often is somebody who has responsibility for customer experience is going to say, look, you know, this process that we have on our website for authenticating users is cumbersome. You know, every time they come back, they have to log in. You know, that is putting them to additional effort. They shouldn't have to do that under normal circumstances. And in fact, you may have noticed at Amazon, you never get logged out. You've got to reformat your hard drive to get logged out of Amazon. And then your browser will autofill the password for you, so you're back in business.
Yep.
But there are a lot of companies that automatically log you out. And if you ask them why, if you ask the CEO why, they'll say, well, our security person says that this is best practice and it's essential to prevent us from getting hacked or protect our customers' data. So that's why we do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you went to Jeff Bezos and gave him that rationale, he would say, okay, prove it. You know, you show me the data that we're actually going to lose money if we do this compared to the sales we're going to lose if we put customers through additional processes. In fact, you know, Amazon does not have zero security. It seems like they're sort of loosey-goosey, but they're actually not. When you go to Amazon, you're always logged in. That one-click button is right there so you can order with one tiny little click.
Yep.
And it'll be, you know, it's going to be on your doorstep in 48 hours or less. But if you try and do something a little bit risky, they will then re-authenticate you. If you decide to send gift cards to a friend and sending Amazon gift cards is like sending cash pretty much.
It is.
Or if you decide to ship a TV to an address that you've never shipped to before, they will then re-authenticate you. They'll ask you to re-log in. They'll ask you for your credit card information, something. But
Right.
what they do is they enable those 99% of the low-risk transactions to be accomplished with near zero friction with that one-click button. But when they enter this realm of a higher risk transaction, then, okay, we're going to do something extra to make sure that you're really you.
Yeah.
And it's keeps the customer safe, it keeps Amazon's bottom line safe,
Hmm.
but it also generates more revenue than if, like so many businesses, they just logged you out and forced you to re-authenticate every time you got in. Because most businesses operate on sort of a walled garden basis with it. You're either in and you can do anything that you want, or you are outside and you really can't access any of your account information. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
You don't exist, or at least you don't exist as a logged in customer.
Yeah.
Where smart companies have sort of a layered approach that, okay, this, you can do all this stuff really easy without re-authenticating. Now this is higher risk. Maybe that we'll do something about. For example, like United Airlines is, when I was flying, and until this, I was flying 100,000 miles a year on United. So
Right.
I got to know them very well, and their user experience on their website is pretty terrible. Oddly, their mobile app is pretty darn good. So I'm assuming there's different teams involved in that.
Right.
But just, I mean, the logouts, the passwords, the challenges, like every month or so, they say, we don't recognize your device. And I've got to answer questions about my best friend's birthday. And I've got to
Right.
figure out what I said, 5 years earlier. It's just insane. It's horrible user experience. But I'm guessing that the security person has the upper hand. And when the customer experience people say, well, our customers hate this. Well, yeah, but we got to do that to protect them. It's for their own good. And they just roll with that. But that's an example of a sort of single wall situation, because there are certain high risk transactions. Okay, I should be able to search flights, maybe even change a flight or book a flight or something. If it's me, and if I'm the traveler, okay, is some other person going to book a flight for me someplace using my passport and such? That's not going to make any sense. But if I say, okay, I'm going to transfer 200,000 miles to my friend in Bombay, well, okay, hold on, Roger, we need to re-authenticate you before you
Yeah.
transfer all
Sure.
those miles. But that isn't how they do it. So to me, there are a lot of reasons, but just simple customer focus would probably, and also observing customers. I don't think people realize what they are putting customers through. I've seen, in fact, a friend of mine who you may know, at least by reputation, is Martin Lindstrom. He's written
Hmm.
about neuromarketing and branding, and really super smart guy. And he's got a new book coming out that it's been delayed because of the pandemic situation.
Hmm.
But he has he has some great stories in there where he's put executives through what their customers have to go through. And I'm not going to spoil the fun by revealing the details, but when one of the corporate executives suddenly had to do what their customers were routinely forced to do, it was like, holy cow, this is awful. I mean, this is what people have to do. So it just, people don't always realize that. And if they could empathize with their customer, either by doing it or just putting themselves in their position. I mean, to me, it's like the airline CEO who says, oh, we offer pretty good flight experience, who has never sat in the back row of basic economy that doesn't recline. Put that CEO back there for a 4-hour flight and see what he, or maybe someday she, thinks of the service.
Yeah. Empathy is so critically important for people that run companies. I mean, they have to be understanding and empathetic to what their customers are going through. When you were talking about Amazon a few minutes ago, I saw someone sent a social post out one time that said Amazon has gotten to be so fun and so addictive that people almost look at it like a social medium, that they'll go to it every day and see, hey, what deal do they have for me today? And I was noticing on their mobile application, just, I mean, I don't do the one-click ordering all the time, but I did it a couple weeks ago, and it was so much fun to swipe across and have a one-click order. And I was just, again, removing friction for me has made Amazon, and this is when you look at the largest companies in the world, when it comes down to market cap, you look at Amazon and Apple and different things, and I mean, there's just fundamental principles that say they make it easy to buy their products.
Well, let me
Yeah.
give you one story, Drew,
Yeah.
because it involves both of those brands,
Yep.
Amazon and Apple. And you alluded to this just now. You talked about one-click ordering.
Yep.
Well, back in 1998, when a lot of companies were still trying to figure out what e-commerce was, Amazon patented one-click ordering. And a lot of companies didn't think you could do that. I mean, it was just, it's too simple, too obvious. But Barnes and Noble, their chief competitor at the time, because Amazon was mostly books, implemented something similar to one-click on their site, and they got in a big legal fight with Amazon. And after a few $1 million in expense and a couple of years, Amazon prevailed. Their patent was valid. And what did they force Barnes and Noble to do, and other e-commerce competitors? Add one tiny little click. That's all. Millions of dollars to gain one little click advantage. And at the same time, there was another smart person. Steve Jobs was about to launch Apple's new music store. And he saw one-click ordering, said, we need that. They didn't try and fight the patent. They didn't try and create a technical workaround. They went to Amazon and paid them $1 million so that they too could have that one tiny little click advantage. And that's all the effort. And so when you go to your developers and say, hey, we'd like to eliminate a few keystrokes here, they're going to say, oh, that's nothing. And people are used to that. It's a few keystrokes. It was worth millions of dollars for Amazon and Apple to gain one single click advantage.
Yeah.
And people don't understand how even small amounts of effort can make a difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's one thing that I think almost sometimes I get made fun of for how obsessive I am about how people route through the website or in the buying process. I remember I made a big stink a few years ago about cart abandonment and about, people were having to go through so many steps in the process. And, we were having some ridiculous abandonment when we got to maybe it was either the fees or putting their address or, starting a new account. And I was like, how do we cut down on things like this? But that's the type of thing. I think this is what your overall message is that these are the type of things that companies should be looking at.
Right. Well, I've got some interesting data on cart abandonment
Yeah.
because the most recent number I had, and it's only an estimate, of course, is that a couple of years ago, $4.6 trillion was abandoned in e-commerce shopping carts overall. Like, nobody really knows what that number is, but somebody calculated that. And to me, it's probably pretty realistic in terms of magnitude. And when one company looked at the reasons for cart abandonment, they surveyed customers to find, okay, why did you abandon your cart? Most of them were frictional in nature. It was things like a complicated checkout process, the need to set up an account. You just mentioned that, Drew. You don't. Many companies don't force you to set up an account. Things that are confusing. One thing that Amazon does that's really smart, they've got, if you check out manually, you don't use the one-click process. If you go through the cart process,
Right.
You have to go through a couple of screens. They always tell you what's happening. The continue button will say underneath it, you'll have a chance to review your order before you check out.
Right.
I've been on e-commerce sites where there's a next or a continue, and I don't know if that is going to result in a thank you for your order, Roger. We're ready to go.
Right.
When I'm not sure what the shipping charge is or whether they applied the coupon that I think they applied and so on. But Amazon has optimized every little bit of that to make it flow easily. The customer can move confidently from one step to the next. Obviously, eliminating steps is the best part, but they give customers the confidence to move without hesitating and saying, oh man, what's going to happen when I do this?
Stress, anxiety, these things, if they build up, you see more opt-out, right? You see more cart abandonment when stress, anxiety, surprises pop up. That's why a lot of times, with Amazon, other than maybe state tax now these days, you kind of know what the price is all the way through. And you're confident when you get to that end screen to press purchase that you weren't duped into it's going to cost this much, but then there's going to be exorbitant fees on top, especially if you're a Prime customer.
Yeah, and it's it just makes so much difference that they give the customer that level of confidence that and so many companies just don't offer that. And trust is important. And let's talk about loyalty, because one thing that you mentioned sales tax. I've been a very loyal Amazon customer for probably 10 plus, maybe 15 years.
Sure.
And for the last 10 easily, just most of my online purchases come from Amazon. Rarely do I shop around unless I'm looking for something really specialized that they don't have. And a few years ago in the state of Texas, my loyalty was tested. they were not charging Texas sales tax. They worked a deal with the state where they would begin charging sales tax. And suddenly my prices went up 8%, which is not a small price increase. 8% immediate price increase. And so I said, okay, I'm going to shop around more. I'm going to check out Overstock or some of these other companies that I might at the time not have to pay tax with, eBay. And in fact, I look back a year later and my behavior had changed just about zero. I trusted Amazon too much. I was too loyal. It was too easy just to keep doing business with them. And so I just swallowed that 8% price increase. And if you can get your customers to swallow an 8% price increase on basically products that are widely available, you're doing something right.
Right. They
And
built
Amazon
that
clearly
trust over
is.
time. Right. I mean,
You know,
yeah, that's what's amazing about Amazon is that, once your credit card is in there, and again, that seamless shopping experience, but then, they deliver on their, that box shows up at your door. There's something so, there's that dopamine hit that you get when it shows up at your door, but you build that up enough times and you become, Pavlovian in some level. It's like, I'm not going to go anywhere else when I'm going to go here because I know they're going to serve me the food. You know what I mean? And they're going to do it every time on time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. In one of my keynote slide decks, I don't have it in any of my current decks right now, but I had a photo of an Amazon Prime truck with the driver carrying a box toward my doorstep, and follow that with a slide for the chemical formula of dopamine, because it is, it's like, when you see that truck, yes, something good is coming for me, and you anticipate those rewards. It's what dopamine does. It's reward anticipation. And all you do is see that, and you know that there's going to be something good in that box that you wanted. So that's really great. When we talk about loyalty, Gartner, the big market research company, did some really remarkable research on customer service interactions. When people have to interact with a brand, maybe they've got a problem, a question, tech support, a return, any kind of interaction outside the just exact normal order flow where it all happens pretty much without human involvement. What they found was pretty amazing. They put people into categories of high effort interactions and low effort interactions. Those who had a high effort interaction, 96% of them said they would be disloyal to the brand. That's about 10 times as high as those customers who had a low effort interaction. Only 4% of the high effort customers said they would buy again, compared to about 94% of the low effort, low effort
Yes.
customers.
Yep.
You
Yep.
gotta make sure I
Right.
get
Yep. No, you
the
got it.
names right there.
Yeah.
And you know how important word of mouth is these days. You've got social media, you've got review sites and rating sites, and people, that's the first thing people check. Well, 88% of the high effort customers said they would say bad things about the brand, compared to just 1% of the low effort customers. And the scary thing, Drew, is that effort is in your customer's head. It is not an absolute standard where you can say, okay, we've got enough effort out of this, we're good now. They are comparing your experience to Uber, to Amazon, to whatever they think a low effort experience is. And if yours seems more effortful, then it's a high effort experience. And that's a huge driver of loyalty and of word of mouth. So, that's why, I'm not sure that even Jeff Bezos knew that when he was focused so relentlessly on minimizing customer effort. But whether it was knowledge or intuition, he really got it right.
Yeah, absolutely. That entire principle you just talked about of low effort interactions. I brought that to our company last year to talk about a secondary, there's net promoter score, there's other research scores that you can go into. I said, but one of the most important things is if we can, now this takes a lot of moving parts if you want to do it correctly and do it at different points in the interaction with customers, but a customer effort score, CES.
Yes.
But would you advise companies to get into that as well?
Yes, I'm a fan of customer effort score because it's measuring their perception of effort, which is what
Right.
counts.
Right.
I would advise measuring effort in a couple of ways. Doing a customer effort score measurement, and I don't think you necessarily have to buy the product. You can ask a similar question and interpret your results in some way. But also measuring the absolute effort. In other words, If you can correlate that with, wow, this person took 5 minutes to check out and they said it was effortful, go back and look at the data. Why did it take them 5 minutes to check out? You know, you might find some answers in your data. And
Yes.
so to me, data is really important, and you can get all kinds of data. You can, for instance, even very small businesses, some of these tools are free or ridiculously cheap. You can do click tracking.
Yes.
If people are clicking on stuff on your website or your mobile app that is not clickable, that means not that they are stupid, that because you go to the
No,
web
they
developer, they'll
expect
say,
something, so then they're
yeah, right.
frustrated.
They think it frustrates them. They think it should be
Right.
clickable, and it's not. And the web designer might likely say to you, well, you can't fix stupid. I mean, obviously that's not clickable,
I hate that answer.
and it's,
They're humans. I mean, just
that's
like
right.
we
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. If you need, outside input, have your mom, or if you're young enough, have your grandmom try out whatever it is you want people to do. If they can't figure it out, then you can be pretty sure that many of your customers can't figure it out either.
Yeah. Or
And they're,
children.
all these tools are so simple. I mean, obviously, you could spend, massive amounts of time and money analyzing absolutely everything. But I think by cherry picking a few things and doing them for a period of time, you can hone in on certain problems. Figure out, well, gee, we do have a cart abandonment problem, or actually our cart abandonment isn't the problem. It's generating the leads in the first place. So it's the problem or something. Figure out where your problems are and instrument those. Look at your digital data, get feedback from your customers in some form or other. And, you can do simple tests. You can do eye tracking now. With the tools are not the most accurate, but you can do like online online
Yes.
eye tracking
Yep.
panels for
Yep.
just maybe a couple $100, and they can look at your mobile app or your web app, your website, and tell you what people are looking at.
Absolutely. I've used
And
multiple free tools, and like today on any website that I'm associated with, we use the tool Hotjar because Hotjar does all of those things. It can do process tracking, heat tracking, as far as
scroll tracking probably.
click tracking, all those different things for free. So, it's amazing I always joke about this with colleagues. I'm like, if you want to have a very educational day, but a cringe-worthy experience, do a Hotjar test on click tracking and watch people record your visitors, watch people interact with your website, and you will both, it's incredibly educational of what you can change to make things better, but you're sitting there most of the time going, oh my gosh, I made this so hard for my customers to find what I want them to find.
Yeah, and that's way cheaper than, say, setting up a usability lab in your
Yeah.
office, or bringing people in and observing them with video and such. I mean, you could do that if you've got the resources, and you may learn something else there. But using some of these simple tools, using user testing tools, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. I think that
Sure.
for getting very quick feedback on a new app or new website or some significant design change in whatever it is that you're doing, these online testing panels like from usertesting.com are
Yeah.
pretty good and pretty cheap way of doing it. I do think that to some degree they can become almost professional website or app evaluators, because they're supposed to be providing a running commentary as they go, where they're giving the order, okay, figure out how to find winter gloves on this site, and then buy a pair of large red ones or something. They're going through the process and talking through it. If you do that for 100 or 200 websites, you become a professional website analyzer,
Website
professional
critic.
shopper.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but nevertheless, even that flawed feedback will give you something. And because they are experienced, some things may pop out at them and say, well, they may verbalize, wow, that's a weird place to put the buy button. I almost didn't see it over there in the corner.
Yeah.
As opposed to
Absolutely.
a new user who's just kind of oblivious and wandering around.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Roger, this has been amazing, and thank you. I think you and I could probably geek out on marketing probably all day, talk about all these different topics. But you're a busy guy, and I want to be respectful of your time. You covered. I had a couple rapid fire questions, but really, I'm going to go right into my final one because I think the one of the questions was going to be about one tactic, but I think you've given us about 20 different things to analyze and tactics that we can do, not even tools, even we've given tools, but we don't have to talk about social and email marketing. This is really about customer experience. And I think you've given the audience a ton of tools and tactics and tricks and tips to go back to their customer experience and see how can we remove friction. I do want to ask you before you go, what is one book that you probably gift the most, or that you would recommend that that the audience maybe pick up that will be really educational for them,
Well,
other than
I,
your books? Yeah.
right, yeah, I'll skip over those. Although I would highly recommend those, of course. But no, I'm gonna give you two if I can, Drew.
Okay.
One is from a more personal development standpoint, and that would be Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's really an excellent guide to habit formation, and he makes it seem easy. Now, forming good habits, especially difficult habits, like working out. He's a serious weightlifter, so those are not necessarily easy habits to form, but he makes it seem easy. And his methods do allow you to start slowly and build up, so you don't get discouraged. So I recommend that from a personal development standpoint. And from a business standpoint, this is one that is not that well known of a book, but I highly recommend it. It is Trust Factor by Paul Zak. He is the oxytocin researcher who discovered that was the hormone of trust. And he chronicles some amazing research that he and his team did, where they went into companies and they were trying to determine what makes companies high performing. So they selected a range of companies who were high performers and not so high performers. And they did a lot of employee surveys, like ask people a whole bunch of questions, including questions about trust. And then they also took thousands and thousands of blood samples. And what they found was that high performing companies were high trust companies. And they determined that not only by the responses to the surveys, because as a neuromarketing guy, I know that surveys don't always give you accurate answers, but
Right.
by the blood samples too. And to me, that is a message that any company can internalize. If you have higher levels of trust between the business and the individual employee, between the employees and each other, between the bosses and the employees, and so on, where you have high levels of trust, you will have higher performance. And I cite that work in Friction because so often we have bad processes in companies because there's a lack of trust. At some point, some manager or big boss determines, well, people are going to do this wrong. They're going to abuse the system somehow. So we're going to put these checks and balances in place, like for expense reporting. If you want to be reimbursed for that $2 cup of coffee, you had better staple that paper receipt to your expense report. Or these days, you had better take a photograph of it, upload the photograph to our expense app, and associate it with the correct line item, because we don't think that we can trust you that you bought a $2 cup of coffee at the airport. You might have difficulty finding a $2 cup of coffee at the airport today, but we have these processes in place, or something has to be approved by 3 layers of management, because we don't trust the people to do it right or to do it honestly. When there's more trust, you can eliminate some of these bad processes, and overall, people are more willing to get with the mission of the company. If they don't feel trusted, are they really going to buy into the company's mission statement or feel that they are part of a true team? No, they're not. If there's a lack of trust. So to me, those are my 2 recommendations, Drew.
That's wonderful. I have not heard of Trust Factor, so that's great. That's another one that I'll pick up. So awesome. And again, yes, of course, I want to encourage people to pick up Brainfluence and Friction by Roger Dooley. So Roger, just one more thing. Let everybody know out there where they can find you and how they can follow your career and your writing and everything else.
Well, on social media, I am at Roger Dooley at most places like Twitter and Instagram, or simply Roger Dooley on Facebook and LinkedIn. The best jumping off point for all my stuff, including my podcast, my books, my various blogs, some of which are on different sites, is rogerdooley.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. Make sure everybody checks that out. Roger, thank you so much. Again, a great honor. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'll be shouting it from the rooftops to make sure that everybody goes and checks out all of your books and continues to follow your podcast and your newsletter, because those are excellent as well. Thanks again, Roger.
Well, thank you, Drew. It's been fun.